Hi, it's me again. So, if you're eagerly anticipating February 14th when this comes to the film scene, you have been exposed to adult fiction, or as they call in the genre, erotic fiction. This is not a good book. Not because of the subject matter, but because it's such a poorly written book. But if you've read it, you may be interested in more books in the field, and I'm going to point out some better writers in the field. And so that's what today's all about. And it's winter, so I wore my jammies. So here we are in my jammies talking about hot books for cold nights. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is look for a writer that can actually write the book. And one of the things that 50 Shades did was it opened up this genre for many, many people. And it also exposed writers who've been writing it for a very, very long time. There's two of those writers I'm going to talk about right now, Laura Lee and Maya Banks. And Maya Banks and Laura Lee are romance writers. They were called romance writers for a long, long time. Now they're erotic fiction writers. And mainly these books are different from romance. They're not like Danielle Steele or Nora Roberts because the sex in the books is very graphic and may be offsetting to some readers. You may not want to read descriptions of sexual acts, and maybe sexual acts that are not something that you may have been exposed to. So that's a word of caution whenever you engage in erotic fiction. Laura Lee has been writing for about 20 years. She has many, many series on cowboys and military guys and ancient warriors and werewolves, and you know, we all jumped on the vampire wagon a couple of years ago. She didn't. And of course, everybody knows Anne Rice, who really is probably the most popular early writer who was writing this 30 years ago in her vampire books. Anne Rice is considered, you know, something of a legend in the erotic book field, but she didn't denounce it, but she sort of stepped away from it, but she's back. Her trilogy about the taming of, and I can't remember what it was, but it's a classic. And so a lot of these writers started because of Anne Rice. Laura Lee's one of them. Laura Lee has many, many series, like I said before. The one I like is the Pleasure series, and this evolves around a Virginia club, adult club, where the members bring their wives or girlfriends or whomever, and there's all kinds of things going on. But there's also intrigue because most of these people are CIA people or FBI people or informants or something to do with intrigue. And Laura Lee can really write, so the stories are really involved, and with occasional sex scenes. That's what we'll say with Laura Lee. But she's a good writer, and I really would recommend Laura Lee on any of her series. I'm particularly fond of the Pleasure series just because it's more about Washington, D.C., and that's something that I'm more interested in. Maya Banks. Maya Banks has written probably for 20 years also. Her stuff is more, it's based on real people, real situations, but alternative forms of sexual relations often happen in her books. And really one of the first people to do S&M and bondage and that kind of thing in a book, and that was almost 20 years ago. The Possession books are the story of 6 friends in Texas and the people that they come in contact and what happens in their lives, and each book is about one of the people, and it's very interesting. She really takes the characters and makes them complete human beings, and you see the characters throughout all the other books, so if you like a character, you're going to run into them again in the other books. Maya Banks tried to write regular fiction a couple of years ago and really reject it at the booksellers, because once you start writing this kind of book, they kind of peg you into it, and you're always going to write it. Laura Lee tried it. Zane, who we'll talk about in a few minutes, tried it. But again, Maya is a good writer. I like her character development, and she's just kind of she knows what she's doing, and it comes out on her page. Megan Hart is another author who's been around for a little while, probably about 15 years, 20 years. Her books are not sequels or trilogies or ongoing stories. She writes single books about people and sometimes alternative lifestyles. I like Megan Hart a lot because she develops male and female characters equally, which in some erotic fiction you get it from the female point of view and the male is basically just a stud. Not with Megan Hart, and they're very complex characters. And again, sex thrown in, just for that little extra. A lot of people love Sylvia Day, and Sylvia Day, I'm not a fan of hers because I don't get into bodice ripping in 18th century London, and a lot of her books are centered in old time or in Europe or someplace else. But she started the Crossfire novels about 3 years ago, about the time 50 Shades came out. And these are not based on 50 Shades. The character, this was in development before 50 Shades, and it got the green light because 50 Shades took off and it became that. This is now in its 4th book about Gideon and Eva, and again, the books are really interesting. The male character is very complex. I find that to be good when you have both mixed. Sylvia Day, I'm not, like I said, I'm not a fan of her other writings, so this is the only series of hers that I really actually like and I would recommend. Okay, so then we have Opal Crew. I think she's my favorite writer in the erotic fiction writer because she writes about everybody. Whether you're straight, whether you're gay, whether you're transsexual, she has a story about everybody, and all of her books reflect that. Some of her books are very uncomfortable for people to read. She had a book recently, in the last year, a trilogy about 2 brothers who shared the same woman, and that offended some people. I was reading that in Publishers Weekly. That kind of offended some people, but she often puts people in relationships that are different, and I think it's a form of it that when you read that, you're kind of exposed to it, and I think she does a great job of that. She's also a very good writer, and she writes really good stories. In urban fiction, which is a fiction that I don't read very much of, I've read a few things, Zane is the king, and Zane is been writing this stuff for 20 years too, and in fact 3 years ago the New York Times did a profile of how he wanted to be a legitimate fiction writer without having to do the erotic fiction anymore or doing the urban fiction anymore, and his publisher just wouldn't let him. They just rejected everything that he put out, and he tried, and finally he went back to writing this stuff that everybody, and a lot of people love Zane. Again, urban fiction is a lot tougher than regular erotic fiction because of the situations that are involved. There's crime, there's some other things going on that maybe you're not exposed to. There's a lifestyle that some people aren't exposed to. But again, he writes really complex characters, and he's a really good writer. But one of the things that I really like in the erotic fiction field is when you find somebody who is absolutely hilarious. And I'm going to highlight 3 writers that I really, really like. Millie Criswell, I believe, has passed away. There's nothing after 2004 about her. So I'm going to make the assumption that she has passed away. We have a lot of her books, and they're really funny. And they put people in these hilarious situations, and they get out of it fine. But it's the process, and it's amusing, and I just really like her books. And I hope that it's not true that she's dead, but if she is, we do have her books, and I would recommend reading her. She's really funny. The Beautiful Bastard series. 2 women, Christina Lauren, Christina Lauren as they are here, started writing the Beautiful Bastard series about 3 years ago. And the first book is Beautiful Bastard, which is checked out, so I couldn't show you a copy of that. So you know it's popular. But there's now a series built around the 2 characters in Beautiful Bastard and then all of their friends. So we have Beautiful Stranger and we have Beautiful Player. And again, humor. Very graphic sex scenes. If you don't want to read about the bumping and the humping, don't read these books, because they are both very graphic in that. They just started a new series about 3 college graduate friends called Sweet Filthy Boy, and these are really funny too. And they go to Vegas for college graduation, and what happens is the plan for the next 3 books, and I've just read the 2nd book, and it's as hilarious as the first one. Really like these. The Beautiful Bastard series, she ended it with the wedding, but now there's talk, they've ended it with I keep talking as she's one person, but she's 2 people. They ended it with the wedding, but now there's talk there's going to be a sequel later in the year to Beautiful Wedding. So who knows what they're going to do with those 2 characters. They're interesting characters. They hated each other, and yet they hooked up. That's funny. But that's that common theme of, I don't like you, but I want you. Often found in erotic fiction. The newest name, and just was a semi-profile in the literature section of People magazine, which means you're kind of big if you're honored in People magazine, is Alice Clayton. And Alice Clayton, I believe, used to be in advertising, and she's a late in life writer, and she has written 2 series that I really, really like. I would recommend totally. The Redhead series, which is her first series, is about an actress who's in her 30s. She's done a little bits here, a little bits there, but never quite succeeded. She's at a Hollywood party because she decided to move back to Hollywood and try one more chance. She meets this young British actor. Some people think he's modeled on Robert Pattinson. I don't think so. But anyway, it's about what happens when they meet and they fall in love. And in subsequent books, her career takes off, and he becomes people's sexiest man alive. And what happens to a relationship that they have tried to keep private? And it's hilarious. There's absolutely screwball comedy in this. These would make great movies if they ever did that, or a TV show. It's just hilarious. The other series that started about a year ago is Wallbanger. What am I going to say about that? Caroline lived next door to this guy who traveled around because he's a photographer, but when he was home, he entertained a lot, hence the name Wallbanger. So Caroline, who is the main character, gets mad. They have that back and forth, and then they realize they're attracted to each other. And so Simon, that's the male character, and Caroline start forming a relationship. That's the 2nd book. The 3rd book has just come out, and I haven't read it yet, but I know how it ends, so I'm not going to spoil it for you. These are hilarious because she solves her problems by baking, and he solves his problems by going all around the world and taking pictures and leaving her for periods of time. And it's absolutely hilarious. And they have a cat in it, and the cat has its own character. So, and if you like popular culture, she name drops so much in popular culture. But if you're a big fan of the Barefoot Contessa, she's mentioned a lot in these books. So those are my recommendations. So while it's getting cold and you're looking for something to read, a hot book would probably warm up your night. And I'll be back soon. Thanks.